Welcome back to DMTV. It's been less than a week since we started this program. We started on Monday. Today is Sunday, and it almost feels like, I don't know, at least for me, as if I'm I'm forever stuck in this little room and in your living room and in the living room of our guests. But at the same time, it gives us a beautiful opportunity to hear different voices, also from self-isolation, from different parts of the world and from different perspectives. If you missed the previous episodes, you can find them on YouTube. Yesterday, we premiered an exclusive conversation with Noam Chomsky, which only in one day got almost 100,000 views. So go to YouTube, check it out. Check out what Chomsky's parrot has to say. But also the previous conversations with Saskia Sassen, Larry Charles, Gael Garcia Bernal, Yanis Varoufakis, and many others. I'm really excited tonight to spend this Sunday evening with a great friend of mine, whom I actually have seen only 1 month ago here in Vienna, where I am at the moment, which now looks like good old times. I remember that the guest who will just soon appear on the screen brought a hand sanitizer to Vienna, and we were making fun out of it and laughing at ourselves, saying, oh, maybe we are too paranoid, maybe we shouldn't do it. But only in 1 month, the situation changed rapidly. The borders are closed between many countries. Public events, which we did together, are not possible anymore. So we decided together to recreate the public space which we need today. Our guest tonight is Ece Temelkuran, writer, author of many books, most recently How to Lose Your Country, 7 Steps from Democracy to Dictatorship. Ece, good evening. How are you? What happened in 1 month since we last saw each other?
Hello, Srachko. Yeah, it's depressing, right? It is kind of horrifying as well. I'm trying to keep up my spirits, and it's not easy these days. It's so good to see you, though.
How do you do it these days? You said it's not easy. How do you? I mean, let's immediately just start with.
Sure. I'm like as if Combo and all the political enough. Now we experience earthquake in Zagreb. Actually, a series of earthquakes. So, as you said in one of these episodes, the world expects us contradictory things. There's Corona, stay at home. There's earthquake, go out. Many people I saw on my street were, going around like chopped head chickens. Nobody knew what to do. And on the same day, there was a snow, the snow was falling. And, the people were making jokes, not after this, Godzilla, of course, kind of jokes. But then something really interesting happened since yesterday. There's this dust cloud coming from Turkmenistan, I think, from the desert of Turkmenistan. And now Godzilla does not seem so irrelevant all of a sudden. So, yeah, I'm alone in Zagreb. All of my friends are either in their summer houses in Croatia or in Turkey. So solitude does not make it easier. Although, knowing that after quarantine in China, there was a flood of divorces, maybe it's better to be on my own.
I can see you kept your optimistic side, even in the entire situation.
I wouldn't say optimistic. We are making jokes of despair. One of the most popular things nowadays is, people recording their own videos, how they go crazy. I think there will be a day that we don't feel like taking those videos anymore. So yeah, I'm kind of concerned, actually, to say the least.
Yeah, so let's go. I mean, to the concerning questions. When I asked you what kind of topics, perspectives would you love to share with us today, you mentioned that you would love to speak about this deadly combination, as you call it, deadly combo of coronavirus and something what you call neo-fascism. Could you perhaps explain a bit? Maybe also from the perspective of where you are at the moment in Croatia. because also some new rules are being implemented in Croatia. There is a lot talk about new surveillance technologies, geolocation tracking of citizens and so on. Maybe from this perspective, but also if you can put it in the context of your most recent book, which basically deals with this kind of processes which lead from democracy towards dictatorship. So instead of dictatorship in one country, are we perhaps facing a dictatorship on the whole planet? How do you see it?
I'm always talking about the cheerful subjects. Everybody will hate me very soon. Well, what strikes me most is we are going through a pandemic which is expecting exactly the same things that fascism would expect us to do. It is isolation, restrictions, atomization, social distancing, and it creates an environment, the virus, we are required to follow those rules, obviously, but the virus creates an environment which is amazing for right-wing populism, for authoritarian regimes, and for fascism in general. So that is quite concerning. So the overlap, so to speak, the expectations of fascism or the tools of fascism and the requirements of Corona, I think it will create an environment in coming weeks or months that, all this surveillance, all this, close watch of individuals, all this control will become legitimate, not only legitimate, but also, will be wrapped in, restrictions for requirements in, for the pandemic. That is kind of, it's a frightening thing to say the least. What I see now is that we are expected to rewire our brains, and we have to do it very, very fast because of Corona. We have to rewire our physical manners, our emotional state, and our mental state, mental being as well. And we are supposed to do it very quickly. So actually we are performing very good, I think, because not touching the face is against our neurological system. We have to touch our faces for several reasons. Having the social distance is impossible because we don't know how to get in solidarity, how to soothe each other, how to love each other, how to interact with each other from a distance. So it is actually paralyzing all the emotional, physical, and mental, our being in all these aspects. So I think, I don't know how everybody is dealing with it, but it was like 5-6 days to my self-isolation. And, it was only a week or so that this, social distancing became a thing. And I was watching a movie. I saw someone kissing someone else. And I felt a shiver, like, don't do it, don't do it. And I thought how fear actually transforms your thinking and your habits, lifelong habits, just in few days. Fear is very effective. We know this from fascism as well, but we are now learning it through Corona pandemic too. So that is quite interesting. And I think there are two sides of it, or both sides of the coin here. We are going through the worst of times, and we are going through the best of times. The worst of times is not only because there's this crisis and we are expecting other crises after this one, and we are trying to deal with these crises with the worst possible political leaders in power, but also the solidarity is becoming impossible. We have to reinvent solidarity very, very quickly. And we still are, TV is one of those new tools that we are trying to invent. And it is just, I know how it came to you. I was thinking the same thing. We wrote to each other, let's do this. And you said, oh, we're already doing it, join. So we have this urge to act when we are afraid. We have this urge to run away, let's say, or we have the urge to connect to each other when times are really hard. But now we have to reinvent how to do it in these times. So this is not an easy thing. So this is part of, you know, the worst of times side of the coin. But there is a good side of it as well. I don't know what you think, but I observe that there is a general feeling of it cannot go on like this. You know, people who have been reading, who are politicized, who are following the political developments all around the world, they already knew that capitalism is going through its biggest crisis. Democracy is going through its crisis. All the democratic institutions are crumbling. They're becoming inadequate to deal with the world problems and so on. But those people who are not politically active, those people who love to say that I hate politics, now they are also voicing this demand for a better world, for a more fair world and a more equal world. I'm like, it's not, people were making fun of it. Britney Spears asking for general strike, you know, Comrade Britney. I'm not making fun of it because actually it shows us that even the most apolitical person has a political thinking when he or she really needs it. And it becomes activated when the time is right, when the conditions are mature, ripe. So this is a good thing. This is something shaping right now, and it's shaping very fast as Corona. It's as contagious as Corona, actually, this courage and the urge to speak up. And another good thing is for those people who weren't really convinced that right-wing populism is really sort of political insanity, are now seeing very clearly that these ghoulish or clownish right-wing populist leaders are completely inadequate, are completely incapable of dealing with real problems. And also, they are retreating, which is interesting, you know, from Tayyip Erdogan to Trump, from, you know, other right-wing populist leaders, Johnson and so in Britain. They're all retreating. We don't see them anymore as much as we did before. They love to speak normally. They want to see themselves in these, you know, magic mirrors and so on, but now they're not. So it is good that their noise is decreasing, whereas the demand for a better world, a just world, is increasing. Also, another observation, less and less people are talking about post-truth. You know, we have been talking about post-truth since 4 or 5 years now, very actively. And all of a sudden, that topic is off the table because we now know that we need facts, we need the truth, and nobody wants to be deceived by those fake news that are, manufactured and multiplied by the troll farms and so on. So it's like a reaction, almost like a reflex. I see people turning to science, which has been discredited since a long time. So that is very important as well. And this happened in only 1 month. You know, for years we have been dealing with these issues, but a virus did what we couldn't do since years by talking, through talking or criticizing the regimes or the post-truth world. Another positive, I don't like this word though, but anyway, another positive aspect of what we are going through right now is, I think we are the, first generation since generations that has the time in his hands to think, because the world has come to a halt. So we now have time. really, to think and to imagine a new world. And we can do it together, thanks to, you know, communication tools like we are using now. But if people are doing politics now, for those who are active in politics, I think one thing should be certain. Since retreat of the right-wing populist leaders and the incapacity of the institutions, and since there's this chaos and crisis, I think there's a political vacuum. And it's very, apparent now, especially in United States, we are seeing this. And this political vacuum should be abhorred by grassroots movements that can be led by progressive leaders. What Bernie Sanders is doing is very important at the moment. He is not, he's not focusing on the elections anymore, but he went to the people and he wanted to be part of the movement that is, coming up from the grassroots because of Corona. So I want to bring up, sort of a new concept. I was thinking, how can we, conceptualize this politics in times of constant crisis? Because it's not only Corona, there'll be other crises, and there will be political vacuums constantly in coming years. So I think we have to think something like portable politics. So it is portable politics. It's something like, I'm imagining this. It is not doing politics within the institutions, within the political institutions, but rather carrying the politics to where the attention and action is. It is not a completely, new idea. I know that, but if we can conceptualize this, and if we can wrap it, that would fit our times, I think it might give ideas to people who are trying to build new ties of solidarity. So portable politics might be the concept of coming 10 years. This is what I think. And this is not the first time that history requires us to reinvent solidarity, but this is the first time, I think, that it requires to invent it so fast, in full speed, so to speak. That I don't know how to do, because if you cannot touch each other, if you cannot talk to each other, if you cannot go onto the streets, if you are, confined in these, digital environment, how are we supposed to do that? I think we will all have to think about this. So rather than obsessively reading all the news about coronavirus, I think all of us have to really study this topic, how to do it in practical terms. And it is both a horrifying and a wonderful thing that the crisis of capitalism and the Corona crisis overlapped with each other, because it made it visible that the setup of the world is simply stupid, idiotic. And more people seeing this gives me hope, although I'm not a big fan of that word, but also activates my mind and activates my optimism, so to speak. So I feel like, I was reading something from Erich Fromm today, and he says the only certain prediction of a human being is I will die. And then I thought, but then I will live is equally certain. As long as you live, you'll live. That's a certainty. It's tautology maybe, but it's also a certainty. So I think we have to focus on not death and or the apocalypse or what might go wrong or that we are going to die, but we're going to live as long as we do. So I think we have time and to think about what is to come, and how we can change it, how we can reshape it, how we can reshape the world. Another thing, I remembered Beirut. I'm thinking about Beirut since few days, especially after the earthquake. Beirut, I lived in Beirut for a year, and Beirut is is the crib of crisis. It's every day another crisis. It's this constant feeling of crisis, even though there is no, crisis. So I remembered 2006. I was there one day after the Israeli bombardment on southern Beirut. And the next day, Buddha Bar, there's a Buddha Bar in Beirut, it was, full. People were dancing and there was a new cocktail. And the name of the cocktail was the bomb that was used a day before by Israeli attack. And then I learned yesterday that caipirinha, the drink, the cocktail caipirinha, was actually invented during the Spanish flu. Brazilians were told that they had to, drink lemon and so on. So why not add cachaça in it and then, make a good cocktail? And then I thought, these times of fear, we make jokes. We are terrified. We get depressed. We laugh. We mock each other. We do several things, several emotional, political, or mental reactions are filling the space. But then we also build solidarity ties during the times of fear. But when fear is over, when the worst of times is over, we tend to forget the fear along, and together with that, we tend to let go those solidarity ties that we built. So what we are supposed to do right now is not only to form temporary solidarity ties, but also to think how to make them permanent. And having said that, during Gezi uprising in Turkey, there was immense, incredible solidarity, and completely organic, completely spontaneous, and so on. And only one proper, permanent organization survived from that period. It's called Oy ve Ötesi in Turkish, in English, Vote and Beyond. And they became a countrywide network to monitor the ballot boxes against the election fraud, which is huge in Turkey. And they are still, organized. So I think right now, if we are to reinvent new solidarity ties, we have to think them not only as long as Corona goes on, but they should be, a platform for the coming crises as well. And I remember this moment a few months ago. I was on a plane, an elderly lady was sitting next to me. She was dipped in Louis Vuitton. She's this posh lady and so on. But then the plane went into turbulence. And since planes and airports are my natural habitat, I didn't feel anything. But then she went crazy and she started shaking. And before I offered my hand, she, grabbed my hand. And by the time we landed, she was holding my hand with both hands. And then as soon as we landed, she let my hand go. And then she fixed herself and she started walking. And then she turned and threw, a snap of thank you, and then went away. And I thought, it is not rudeness. It's not impoliteness that makes her do this. It is the fear of fear and feeling humiliated and belittled because she was afraid. We shouldn't feel, we should, I think, relax, try to learn how to relax in fear. We should adapt. Unfortunately, we will have to, I think, adapt ourselves to fear to this fearful environment. So if we do that, we might not be embarrassed for what we have done during the times of fear. And if we do that, if we really relax in that feeling, we can carry on with the solidarity ties that we established during the crisis.
Thank you, Ece. This was great. I mean, this is like as if I pushed a button and no, really. Let me try to reflect on some things which you touched upon, and then also we can start with a conversation and also include some questions of the audience. I think you mentioned two crucial concepts. You know, on the one hand, it's fear, and on the other hand, it's solidarity. I mean, what we could have seen with the coronavirus crisis from the very start, before it arrived from China to Italy, was precisely this kind of fear. And I remember, here we come back to fascism. I remember at the beginning, the far right in Italy, they were actually, there was one mayor, I think, or a politician, Italian politician of the far right, who was saying that the only protection of coronavirus is a Roman salute. It's the fascist salute, because it's because then you don't touch anyone, you just do that and so on.
Oh, yeah.
And then I was researching a bit again, I mean, rereading the history of fascism, and it's really interesting to see why did they introduce it in the first place. You know, it wasn't just introduced because Mussolini was so much obsessed with the Roman Empire and wanted to recreate it. You know, in the same way Hitler wanted to recreate the myths of Valkyrie and the great German, you know, mythology and so on. It also had, you know, when you see the descriptions and so on, why did they do it? They mention hygiene, you know, you know, you have to stay clean and so on. And then you can trace it back even to the Italian futurists who were actually constantly claiming, you know, this kind of universe in which we actually live today. But what makes our situation today even more dangerous, I would say, is that, you know, it's not that you have an outer enemy, it's not that you have another nation who is your enemy or something like that, but you have an invisible enemy. And most of us, you know, this is the kind of paradoxical situation which you described as the situation in Zagreb during the earthquake. You know, you have a contradictory threat. And at the same time, I also think this long-term democratic threat is also contradictory in one way. In which way? In the way that, you know, most of us, at least you and me and many of the people who are watching this, are respecting as much as we can the restrictions on mobility, the social distancing, everything what you explained and what rapidly changed. So we are respecting that. But at the same time, we who care about democracy are also fucking scared about the potentials, in which direction it might go, you know, with total surveillance, thermal scanning, facial recognition, geolocation tracking, and, you know, this utter state of exception, which is now happening, for instance, in Hungary. But it's not just Hungary, it's the whole world. So on the other hand, you have what you mentioned, solidarity. And also, thanks for mentioning comrades Brittany, to call her like that. You know, something what seemed completely impossible now seems possible. Like yesterday after our TV show, I watched, now you will laugh probably because you know her, Severina on Instagram, you know. And it was amazing because Severina is this famous pop icon of not only Croatia, but the whole Yugoslav sphere. And she was together with another Croatian singer, Goran Karan, each like the two of us now on their own camera, singing Bella Ciao. And Severina, who is usually expected to be, you know, just a singer and so on, which she is not, you know, she's a feminist, I would say. She even had an introduction about the history of fascism, how the song Bella Ciao was created and so on. And then you can see that this kind of narrative discourse now from a pop singer is going to everyone's home. And it's a beautiful gesture, I think. You know, finally, I mean, of course, I'm asking myself, where have they been 10 or 20 years before? Why didn't they sing Bella Ciao every day? Maybe we wouldn't have been in this situation today. But just this small example shows that there is a recreation of a space of potentiality of potentials, which can lead in any direction. So, yeah, that's just a comment. But
I don't know how you became, politically active, or how you started being progressive, or how you adopted your ideology, let's say. But I adopted it, if you ask me, when I was 4 or 5 years old, when I thought, the kids must not be humiliated just because they are, poor. And then I learned that this is the basics of democratic socialism and so on and so forth. It was much later I learned that this is an ideology, this is a world perspective. So firstly, it was a moral stand for me. It was innate, so to speak. So now I'm seeing, your comrade Brittany or Severina, people are not doing this because all of a sudden in 1 month, because of Corona and self-isolation, they went into, literature, political literature, they read Marx and blah, blah, blah. They are just going back to their normal. And the normal is this, because normal is science, sanity, common sense, and that people should be equal, and the system must be just. And saying that these things were considered as, being a communist bastard or something in 1950s. In 1980s, it was too naive. In 1990s, people were all about cultural criticism, so they didn't even think about these things. And finally, it is sort of back to normal. But speaking of back to normal, I don't know what people are expecting, those who are interested in politics, but I do not think that there will be back to normal. There will be a new normal. And politics is a very, very dynamic thing. So this new normal is shaping now. That is why I mentioned this political vacuum, and it should be abhorred, because if it's not abhorred by progressive movements, by movements that take human being, put human being in the center, it will sure be abhorred by, those people who say, this is a good thing, let's keep on with this. By the way, Hitler does it, but he was a painter. Actually, he was, he wasn't all bad, and so on. So this, and example from Turkey, what Bernie Sanders is doing with limited political power, I have to add, is happening in Turkey on city level. Mayors of Ankara, Izmir, and Istanbul, they're opposition party members, and they have become extremely important political figures thanks to coronavirus, actually. All of a sudden, it's like back to city states, very interesting. These mayors started making statements. They started, bringing new precautions, new solidarity ties, and they made amazing statements, and they started amazing programs. And I do think that, or I want to believe that, this kind of politics is not easy to forget when things change. So I think this will be the case in coming months as well. We see New York mayor is doing this, governor is doing the same thing. We see several other cities trying to protect its citizens and trying to build solidarity ties between the citizens. So maybe this new normal on administrative level will be like city states. We will have to, adapt ourselves to that as well. And the politicians, especially, they have to think like this, and be beyond the whatever flood of events.
I really let me touch upon this concept, because I find it very important. The concept of municipalism, city states, a kind of return to more local power, which is perhaps, as we have seen also in some Italian regions, more effective in dealing with it. So when I look at you at your Croatian Zagreb balcony, I always become nostalgic, and I remember a city in Croatia, Dubrovnik, the Republic of Ragusa. It was the first city which introduced a maritime quarantine in Europe before Venice, before the Italian cities, and it was so successful that in 4 centuries, as long as the Republic of Ragusa existed, the plague came only once into the city. Why? Because they had a very organized city-state model with public healthcare. It was based on information, so no fake news and so on. Although they've been dealing with diplomacy, selling information to Turkey, for instance, to the Ottoman Empire, and then to the Venice, and so on. I mean, they were, they were very successful in also deceiving. But what it shows is, I think I agree completely with you. That we already face a return to. Many of my friends are already saying, why the hell didn't I stay at my island or on a farm or something? I'm not fetishizing local organization because I always think it has to be scaled up. But I think also in Croatia, you can now see that politicians are talking about what should we do with our agriculture, because for the last 30 years, everything was privatized, sold to the big companies, and then big supermarket chains from Germany came, importing food instead of producing food. And that might be good outcome. So I also agree when you say taking Turkish citizens, some progressive cases in Turkey, mentioning them, that we could also say that, the introduction of universal basic income to a certain degree, or cutting carbon emissions, that people will remember that, that people will not go back to the normal as it was, because the normal itself was already not normal. Edge, I think I don't know, but I think you are frozen. Are you still here? Can you hear me? Okay, I think Houston, we have a problem. Let me just contact. Oh, are you back?
Yes, I am back. I'm sorry. I think
for one moment you just appeared completely frozen. I thought it was
internet because of the earthquake. It's sometimes coming and going, and I thought another earthquake was happening, so we could have, get a very good rating actually. But there's no earthquake.
Oh, I'm glad it's not an earthquake. But don't worry, maybe grasshoppers will arrive to your balcony soon.
Exactly. By the way, every day it's happening. Tiny ones during the night. Smaller ones. Yeah. We were talking about the city states and so on. So yeah, but maybe we have to think about smaller political self-sufficient entities when it comes to mobilizing people or building solidarity ties. And speaking of earthquake, I just remembered something. In Zagreb, it was the first earthquake after 140 years, and it just came during Corona. But I'm coming from Turkey, and I went through 1997, the big earthquake, which was 6.7 magnitude. So as soon as the earthquake started happening, the first thing that came to my mind, I woke up, and the first thing that came to my mind was, what was the checklist? What were we doing? Like, where was I standing? And what was I supposed to do? No. And then, I was half sleepy and I did the things. And then I thought, oh, okay, this is the big one. So it passed. So now I have to drink my coffee. I drank one coffee, and then I said, okay, nothing is happening. So I'm drinking second coffee. I drank the second coffee, and meanwhile, another one happened. And I took my third coffee down on the street, on the street, and everybody was panicked. I was relaxed because I know how it goes, and so on. So my neighbor, he's a huge guy. He was really terrified, and I had to soothe him. I said, don't be afraid. This is gone. Everything is okay. This building is okay. Blah, blah, blah. And he wanted to believe me. I didn't know anything, but I just wanted to calm him down. And then I remembered our life in Turkey. we are so used to crises, like it's either this or that, sometimes three crises in one day and so on. And I remember a friend years ago when this bombardment of crises began. It was around 2009, 10 or something. And not many people were aware that Turkey was going towards a very dangerous direction. And we were already, losing it, so to speak. Like Brits lost it during Brexit, like Americans lost it during Trump's election and so on. But we were the first to go through that kind of political and moral madness. So one of my friends said, you know what, I feel it's too tiring, and I feel like let's shut down the country. We have cheese and tomato, that is the basics of Turkish cuisine. We have cheese and tomato and bread. Let's eat tomato, cheese, and bread for 1 year and think, what are we going to do? Let's just stop everything and think. And the world was like that before Corona. Refugee crisis, Trump is there, Putin is there. And I don't know if you remember, it was like good old times now. It is now like, it feels like that. But right 1 week before Corona, we were talking about Syria and a possible third world war. NATO was locking horns with Putin and so on. So maybe finally the nature itself gave us this time, eat bread, cheese, and tomato and think what you're going to do afterwards, after this. So really, this is a precious time. If you manage not to get depressed, which is not easy, if you manage to focus, which is not easy either, I think we can really come up with really good stuff in terms of future of the world.
Thanks also for the very concrete suggestions. If an earthquake hits, first drink coffee because you will need it. Because there will be another earthquake. So that's useful to know. I can see already many questions, so we should slowly also go to the questions of people who are following us live. So let me just Well, this is an unexpected question. I think it's needed, of course, and people are curious to hear. How does Ece assess the short-term and medium-term situation in Turkey? I mean, in face of coronavirus and everything, what was happening before, and yeah.
Well, I wrote about what happened in Turkey and what happened in the world and how they are identical in how to lose a country. And how right-wing populism operates the same way in 7 steps in every country, despite all the differences among those countries. So I don't do predictions. One, it's not good. Second, I'm not an optimist, so I don't want to depress people even further. But after Corona, I think we have a chance now. These mayors, Izmir, Ankara, and Istanbul, they showed people how a politician should be actually. Because after how many years now? 18 years of AKP regime, we seem to forget actually how politics was done, how political leaders were behaving and so on. So it's a good reminder of the proper leader, what these mayors are doing. So probably people will be holding on to that in coming months to demand more justice. But otherwise, what I'm seeing right now is despair, and also a lot of mocking, a lot of political humor. And I told in the book, as you know, in How to Lose a Country, this political humor, it's great. I love it. But after a while, it operates as a paralyzing tool,
Yeah, I think that very often happens with humor. I mean, it can be subversive, but it can be also very impotent. You make fun out of the leaders, populist leaders, but you don't do anything else.
Exactly, and it creates the illusion of political engagement, which is so dangerous. and also it creates this sort of cynicism and fatalism, which I find it really dangerous. I talked about it in the book in detail, but yeah, this is what I'm seeing at the moment. People are trying to keep their spirits up, understandably, but then things are getting serious, and I think, you know, How to Lose a Country, you know, that title is not because I lost a country. It's not because I am exiled or something. You lose your country even when you're living in it. And this feeling of the country, the feeling of being a citizen or belonging to a country is no more there. And it is not only about the right-wing populist leaders, it's a, you know, combination of several things. And the most important part of that combination is lack of solidarity. So, but Turkey, I think right now, relearning solidarity again through Corona, which I find inspiring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's about time to rename your book "How to Lose a World." Because no, I think this question. I mean, many of these questions which you tackle in your book, and also what you just said now. You know, the question of citizenship. You know, what does it mean? You know, you're in a country where you were not born at this moment. I'm in a country where I'm not born, and I'm also not a citizen of this country. Perhaps in a similar way, like you are not in Croatia.
Yeah.
And many people in the world. I have friends who are stuck on New Zealand and they cannot return because mainly the flights from New Zealand, as far as I heard, are now reserved for Germans and then 10% for others. And the prices go from several thousand to 15,000 euros if you because the airlines are really going down, you know. And what does it mean now if you're stuck in a country and you're not
Exactly.
a citizen?
Actually, we have to prepare a list of urgent demands for next month, for for months ahead. One of the items on that list must be open borders, and put whatever you have to put in order to control the epidemic, limit the consequences. But you cannot close the borders because, as we all know, as we all can predict, this will be used as a excuse to close the borders to refugees, to exiles, to whatever, people.
There is precisely a question for you on this from someone. What are your thoughts on how the process of reopening borders after Corona would look like?
Yeah, if we don't do anything, it won't look good. I can tell you that, because this how I started talking about this. This is how I started talking about this. This is the perfect environment for fascism to flourish. I'm like, how can imagine a country and there are no people? How easy to run that country? So this is what's happening right now for several political leaders, either clownish or ghoulish. They have this perfect country that nobody can shout, nobody can do anything. So that's why we have to reinvent solidarity in such times. Speaking of reinventing solidarity, we are doing something really against our nature at the moment. A friend of mine is living in Madrid, and in front of, opposite her building is a care home for elderly people. And she cried all day yesterday because there were body bags brought to the building. And, and the people who are working as carers are locked down with the elderly people in the building and so on. It's a horrible thing. And I said, don't watch it, because if you cannot do anything, don't watch it. Mm-hmm. Watching something while you're helpless, while you cannot do anything, is the worst torture that a human soul can endure. So we are now doing this. We are watching, and we are feeling helpless. But this is not the first time we had to reinvent solidarity. We have to do it again. We are doing it.
Yeah, I mean that's what I wanted to mention. You said that we should come up with concrete demands. I can see that's coming already. I mean, in different parts of the world. I mean, DiEM25 is just one of these trends and movements. So we published recently a 3-point plan what the European institutions, including the European Central Bank and Investment Bank, should actually be doing instead of what they are doing now. Yesterday, there was really good news from Portugal, where migrants, asylum seekers, and everyone who was stuck in the country got, as far as I read, citizenship rights. And I think many other countries could go in that direction. If you are in a country and you're a migrant, you immediately get citizenship rights, which means you can get access to healthcare, accommodation, housing, and so on. Yep.
Morally and philosophically, we are going to go through some sort of transformation, I think, very soon. I thought about this yesterday. Here in Croatia, there were some idiots who were supposed to be in home isolation because they had, they were suspected of corona, but they ran away. So now, in order to get into a pharmacy, you have to show your identity because they have to check if you are supposed to be isolated or not. Anyway, so I went to pharmacy. Since I don't know Croatian still, I didn't know about this identity issue. So the pharmacist said, "I cannot take you in." And then we stood there. It was so awkward. And the woman wanted to help me because not helping me was inhumane, absurd, idiotic or whatever. It was absurd. So she said, "Okay, stay here. Tell me what you want." And she went in and then brought the things. And it took a long while, but she did that. And I thought, this is what's going to happen. People will realize finally what capitalism is imposing on them, being evil, being selfish, being self-centered, is actually wasting a lot of energy. It is a waste of energy because being good or moving towards good is actually innate in human beings. So in order to be evil, you have to make an effort. And we have been, we have been showing effort to become really selfish, greedy, and so on and so forth. I think it's going to stop for many, many people. It will become completely absurd. This concept will become completely absurd to people after Corona.
Mm-hmm. I mean I see it also like that in my hopeful hours, which is at this moment when I'm talking to you at least. So I also see
it was a good time.
We still have some time and some questions. On the one hand, I see it as a possibility of a much worse world with less civil liberties, with constant fear, permanent state of exception. But on the other hand, you can see that in this kind of historical vacuum, as you named it, in this open historical situation, you can also see that the relevance of mutual aid, the relevance of this kind of solidarity, because you can also see that the virus as this kind of invisible enemy or friend, who knows, depends how you see it, is much more complicated and complex than anything else. Like even if you are, as you said, if you are evil, let's put it like that, you cannot operate in the same way as you did before. You can even see that those evil idiots also get infected. I mean, I'm talking about the populist leaders now. And that, anyone who has a brain has to think in the direction, look, if I want to protect myself, I have to protect the others. And the other way around, vice versa, if
connectedness has become so visible. But then, I am sure many of us in the world right now wish for a moral compass in coronavirus, killing only the evil. But unfortunately, it's not like that. And yeah.
Well, I would say, that's also, the very fact that Noam Chomsky conversation from yesterday today was watched by 100,000 people. It shows that people are really hungry for what you say, a moral compass. And if there is anyone, I would say that's Noam for me, in many ways, someone who started with fascism and ended up with coronavirus now. Ended up in the sense that not in any bad way. I wish no one will be with us and he's safe as far as I know. There is a question, I talk too much, sorry, but also the audience, which is connected to this kind of social distance, cleanness, and so on. And the question is, are we gonna experience a ghettization of dirtiness after the virus?
Whatization?
Ghettization, like a ghettoization, sorry.
Ghettoization.
I just read how it was written and it was without an O, so ghettoization of dirtiness after the virus.
You know what? I'm like, I brought up this border issue for a reason. It's going to, how part of the world will be ghettoed, actually, because I can already predict that, European Union is making a statement around June saying that, well, Turkey and these countries are still contaminated, so we cannot, accept anyone from Libya or whatever, whatever you can think of, which countries are convenient, I don't know. So this is why I brought up this, there should be demands already shaping, and one of those demands should be open borders. Do what necessary to prevent the spread of the pandemic, but you cannot stop people from traveling. And this is personal for me as well. My husband is in Turkey, so I cannot see him for several months. So this is an urgent thing for millions and millions of people. But it's also there is also ghettos in the world, and Europe is becoming smaller and smaller. This is your topic more than mine, but Europe was more an open and wide concept before all this Syria thing began. Now the rest of the world is locked out, so to speak, and Europe is like a ghetto in a way, a white ghetto, rather clean ghetto, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So we have a beautiful, I'm just reading the questions. We have a beautiful question, how to end, maybe in a proactive, hopeful, future-looking way, as you did, and thanks a lot for today. So the question is, fascism is immediately favored by Corona. What are the opportunities for anti-fascists now?
I think they're already showing what the opportunities are. Especially in such times when people are afraid, when they're confused, and when everything is uncertain, to hear someone say that it's going to be all right because we are going to make it all right, with this kind of certainty and determination. And this is what Bernie Sanders in the United States, or the mayors in Turkey, and several other political figures in several other countries are doing. So this is an opportunity. The opportunity is to tell people that I am on your side, because the difference is so clear now. Right-wing populist leaders are not on your side. They are on their own side, and they're on the side of the big capital. They don't really give a damn about what you are going through. They don't give two shits about what you are suffering from. They are trying to rescue the big money, big pharmaceuticals, and so on, big pharma. So the big opportunity is for political movements at the moment, progressive political movements, is to say it and say it out loud that we are on your side and we're going to beat this together.
I hoped you were one of the political leaders and not those who have blood on their hands already because they reacted that way to Corona.
You don't know me enough, Srećko.
Well, thanks God there is social distancing, so I'm safe.
Yeah.
No, I really miss you. I miss our times together. I miss the possibility to travel and to see you and other friends in Zagreb. So thanks for bringing me a bit of Zagreb to Vienna.
Oh, thank you. Oh my God, it's so nice to hear this. We're going to drink a lot of gin tonic in summer. Don't worry.
I hope so. Yes, we are coming to an end. Perhaps if you have a final message for the people who are watching us or who will watch us later on YouTube.
Yeah, I do actually. One thing, try to focus and don't think about your emotions, because in times of crises, emotions are overrated. Don't think about them too much. Just do something and don't think about how you feel.
Thanks. Thanks a lot, Ece, for being with us. Tomorrow, for everyone, we have another episode with the Italian investigative journalist Stefania Maurizi, moderated by Ivana Nenadovic. It will be about someone who is for too long in isolation, Julian Assange. And the next day, we have Slavoj Žižek with Renata Avila. That will be fun. Let's see how he will succeed not to touch too much his face. But I'm really glad Slavoj will be with us because he's one of the advisory panel members of DiEM25. He's long with us, and I know many people will follow him. Ece, I also hope you will return again soon to the show, and we stay in touch.
Yeah, let's see that. Thank you, Srečko. See you.
Thank you. See you soon.